This is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 334.
He said that the way that AI currently works is much how he dances at 3 a.m. in the morning. It's with blind confidence in their ability that is unjustified. Let's be clear, AI is taking its information from the internet, and we know that the internet is not a source of truth. We know that the internet has truth in it, but it also has a whole bunch of stuff which isn't true. And so then what plays is that there has to be ways of then putting guardrails on this AI to make sure that it's able to filter out in a very, very black, white, yes, no, binary sort of sense, what is truth and what isn't.
G'day, this is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 334, and our guest today is Angus Stevens, co-founder and CEO of Start Beyond, on taking learnings by experience to new frontiers, putting guardrails on innovation, and creating useful technology for tangible, real-world problems.
I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs, and I believe there is a great chief in all of us, and that through listening to the stories, strategies and techniques of great CEOs, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work. The Inner Chief Podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. So every 2 weeks, I'll bring a deep diving interview with one of these CEOs or another one of a mid to large organisation so you can find your own path to greatness as an executive.
In this episode, I chat to Angus Stevens. Angus is the CEO and co-founder of VR and AR studio Start Beyond, which was named in the top 10 23 AFR most innovative tech companies, as well as in the top 20 Australian startup employers. They've delivered more than 1.2 million AR and VR learning experiences and work with the likes of Accenture and Meta, as well as US VR software giant Strivr. Angus started out in writing, directing and producing television, documentaries, theatre and short films for major radio stations like Southern Cross and Nova, as well as working with artists like Bob Geldof, Ed Sheeran, Lady Gaga, Katy Perry and Taylor Swift. He was named a 2023 Australian Top 50 Small Business Leader and is the chair and co-founder of the Australian Metaverse Advisory Council. He's also a first-time author, having recently released a book called Viewer Discretion Advised. Today, we're going to talk with Angus all about the pioneering work he did in radio a decade ago by bringing a visual element to a live broadcast, recognising when to act on the tension between gaining enough experience and launching his own business, how he has taken learning by experience to stratospheric heights while putting guardrails on innovation, and his thoughts on where education is going to be in 10 years' time. Now, Chief, are you working your tail off, doing everything you can to be the best professional, but still finding perhaps you're not getting in front and you just don't know why? You're not sure if it's a relationship with your boss that's costing you, maybe your routines or your processes, maybe you don't have the right network or the right skills, or maybe you just don't have the right track record in place. Whatever it is, sometimes it's hard to know what exactly might be costing you a promotion and mastery at work. So what I've done is created for you the Chiefmaker Career Scorecard. It's a 25-question survey that gives you a free automated report about your precise situation. I'll tell you exactly what you need to do in order to get ahead and design a roadmap for your dream job and life. As I said, it's totally free. I've automated the whole process so anybody can do it in just a couple of minutes. Just go to chiefmaker.com/scorecard. Chief, before we get into today's episode, if you would like to nominate a CEO as guest of this show, drop us a line with your nominated guest on info@chiefmaker.com.au and we'll check out and see if they are the kind of chief we want to have on our show. So Chief, please welcome Angus Stevens.
Righto, Chief. I'm here with the one and only Angus Stevens, co-founder and CEO of Start Beyond, among other things. Angus, welcome to the Inner Chief.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Angus, we have a great tradition on the Inner Chief. We just love to know where our CEOs come from. Can you tell a bit of a story that sums up your childhood and early life?
Yeah, look, it's such a nice question. I think the story that sort of springs to mind was I'd probably be about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, maybe, playing backyard cricket. We had a thing where my mother's side of the family is pretty big. And so all the cousins, about 2 weeks before Christmas, would come over and we'd have like a whole tribe of kids, you know, sort of ranging from 0 through to about 13 or so. And I was bang in the middle. And I just remember we were playing backyard cricket and my uncle, he just swiveled the stumps. So instead of being able to face all 3, you could only face 1. And he just did it just nice and slyly, just as a cheeky little thing, as I think my niece, who was about 4 or 5, was coming into bat. And I naturally was incensed, like, you know, you can't do that, rah, rah, rah. And yeah, he just sort of turned around.
Now. Yeah.
Yeah, and Ralph just turned around and smiled and gave me a wink, and it's like, no, mate, this is how we play.
Yeah.
And it was just, yeah, I think that kind of captured my childhood.
Have you seen the Bluey episode on cricket?
Oh my God, I've got to see this. This is everyone raves about it. Really?
It's the weirdest thing. Every middle-aged man that I meet has trouble not crying in that episode.
All right, I've got to check it
It's
out.
an absolute. For some reason, there's a couple of moments where you just go, "Oh wow, that is just sums up what cricket and childhood in the 80s and 90s was like."
Oh, mate. Okay, I'm there.
Yeah,
I'm there. Yeah, well, I'm a total cricket nut. I still play now.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
I gave up indoor cricket a little while ago. But anyway.
Yeah, right.
Anyway,
No, we sort of run around with, like, you know, I'm the oldest guy in the team and I'm playing with all these 20-year-olds and it's at Sydney Uni, and one of the guys there was like, oh, you know, so when he thought I was a lecturer, and I was like, no, mate, I just I went to uni here a long time ago, and he's like, oh, when you know, did you graduate? And I'm like, oh, sort of mid-90s, and he goes, oh, you might know my dad.
Oh, fantastic.
So yeah.
Okay, mate. What was your first ever job?
I worked at the local news agent. I'd go there at the crack of dawn and get a bunch of newspapers and then go down to the train station and sell them to people catching the train into town.
Wow.
Yeah, I made the princely sum.
Down to the train station. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you'd have a pile of newspapers that'd be like 6 a.m. You'd be freezing. You'd be in your school uniform because you didn't want to have to go home after it. And sell newspapers for a couple of hours and make $3.15 an hour.
Oh, big bucks.
I was rolling in it.
I love knowing what people's first hourly rate was. And very few on the show. It's over $5. Most people, it's $3-4 an hour.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. What was your first ever car?
So I rode off my parents' car, so that doesn't count, and that was unfortunate. And no, and that was disastrous. Oh man, what was it? It was a nice car. I remember, like, they were like, "Well, it's good that you." I think it was like a Rover, maybe.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and the whole thing just crumbled. It was a nightmare. So they were overseas at the time, so it was a fiasco. But I think my first car was like, I had this job where I was working in LA, and the gig was one where I got to drive. We were doing a doco on LA teenagers and comparing them to their movie life counterparts. And so I was like mid-20s. And when we weren't shooting, I got to drive the presenter's car. So I'm calling that my first car. And that was a BMW Z3.
No way. The first car, the old Z3.
Yeah. Right. It was pretty fun to drive. I was like mid-20s and just having a ball, living in LA, working on this and zipping around.
Roof down?
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. It was blue. It was glorious.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what was your first ever job? Like post-uni, you went to university?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I got a gig. I was working at this company called National Books, and basically we're making books, like nice, like sort of coffee table books, and there was like a whole variety of different sort of stuff. So I was a publisher, and I was like the assistant to the editor, and I lasted 3 months, and just was like, nah, this is not my bag. So yeah, it was good. I learned a lot from that.
So when you look back on the early years, like we'll talk pretty soon about how you got into, the film and the TV side, and even becoming like the creative director for commercial vision, Southern Cross Stereo. But in those early years where you got shaped, and you were working a bit in agency land, and you had pitches and big clients, right?
Yeah,
Brands.
yeah.
What sort of story do you remember that for years later you keep going, oh, that's memorable, that sort of shaped me?
I remember I was working for this company called Flix, and they were like a little in-house sort of production agency. So they'd be pitching for work and also doing other agency work. So agencies would come to them and they make the stuff, or they'd be trying to get their own stuff happening. And I remember I was pitching, like I was working freelance, so I was working as an editor, shooter, and I could direct and cut stuff and sort of put things together. And because I could do lots of different roles, that's how I got the gig, because I was like, oh, well, we'll use you and you can do this and that, and we'll just see how you go. And I remember I was in there, and I was the owner of the company and this other guy who was a really experienced producer who'd made a bunch of docos, like feature-length docos and some TV and so on. And I was in there, and for whatever reason, they sort of threw to me. And then I just had to pitch the idea to the client. And I just remember the room kind of changed. And the two guys who I reported into sort of sat back and just gave me the room. And I did the dance. And after that, like the whole relationship changed, because they were like that. And I remember Bill saying to me, well, okay, you've got it. All right. You will succeed in this. The way you just did that, the way you manage that room, you'll be fine, mate. Wow. And from that, yeah, I got more work and off we went.
You got your opportunity and you nailed it.
Yeah, but it wasn't one of those things where you're like, it was more just seat of the pants. But I knew the idea and I knew how we should do it, and I just was able to articulate that in a way that the client understood and enjoyed. So yeah.
Now, further on in your career, as I said, you did get into this role with sort of Southern Cross Stereo and really leading this commercial vision part of their business and growing that. In some ways, you and your team wrote the rule book on this. This was fairly new to the industry. Like when you think about that time and almost building this kind of whole period about this whole angle of bringing vision to stereo and things like that into radio, what did you guys do that was so different and game changing? Because this really did change the game, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, everyone always loves, that, everyone's got this sort of sweet spot career time where you look back and everything becomes golden and gorgeous, and with the benefit of hindsight, everything was fabulous. But it was a very interesting time. So basically, 2005 YouTube kicks off. I get this gig probably about 2 years later. So people know that video is a thing online, but they're not really sure what that means. And it's still being dictated to by long form. It's basically, you've got a couple of kids mucking around, but there's not a real sort of structure or shape to it. And Hamish and Andy were just starting off. Carl and Jackie O have been around, but they weren't like the beast that they are now. And basically we were like, okay, so how do we capture the personalities of these on-air talent that have already got this great relationship on air? Given that it's all radio, how do we then find ways of taking something that's happened on air that the audience has already heard and make it into something that would motivate you to bother going to the website, to look at the video and to actually engage with something separate to what you've already heard? Yeah. And we very quickly sort of realized that, things which are now obvious, but like make it short. Don't make it 5 minutes. Make it like 60 seconds long. Have the 5 key images right at the start of the piece before you even go into the story, just to hook people. And it went so well. Like, it was when I was looking at this, and it made me, like, the interview that we were doing today, and it made me go back and have a look on the old LinkedIn profile and actually go back and see what the hell I did way back then. And one of the things it's got there is like, we went from like 20,000 monthly views to 4 million. And the way that we were able to do that was by this structure of essentially what is now, Instagram threads or TikTok, etc. We were doing that within RM Player in this format. And we did Hamish and Andy. We did the ridiculously short film festival, whereby we made it that you could enter a film into it. We had Jeffrey Rush as the judge, and basically you had to make a film, but it could only be 7 seconds long. And so people were putting these things in. I think the guy who won did a spoof of Mission Impossible, the first Mission Impossible, using his baby and dropping his baby down to the cot to then, grab something out of the cot.
Yeah.
As Tom Cruise dropping down in that.
Into that security, into the bank vault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, people were super inventive, and it was a lot of fun. It was great. I remember interviewing, Lady Gaga underneath the stairs because she hadn't really broken out yet, and we didn't have anywhere else to shoot her. Doing an acoustic, sitting in the same room with Paul Kelly or Lily Allen. It's just me and Lily Allen as she sings a song. You're just like, what the hell? So it was fun. It was good.
Yeah. Who was the most memorable character you came across back then?
Well, I mean, the thing that was funny was like there was kind of like a direct proportion to talent to diva-ness. So basically, if you were super talented, you weren't a diva, and the ones who were the one-hit wonders were the nightmares. So there was kind of like a sliding scale there. I remember we were back.
Good to know.
Yeah,
I'd say prefer that than the other way around.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Like people who knew they were good didn't have to. They weren't scared.
Yeah.
So they weren't precious because they just knew they could turn it on. Like they could sing. If you're a singer and you can't sing, it's a very tricky scenario.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
I gotta say, Greg, I haven't heard your career musically. I'm certainly you're on Spotify.
I'll keep it quiet. I'll keep it quiet.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. So look, I mean, I remember being like basically we were backstage and we were doing. It was Hamish and Andy. They were going to do their last show, and it was in Melbourne, and it was the day before, and I got told that their surprise guest was going to be U2, and no one knew that was going to happen. And I was one of 4 people in the company that had been told this because we were live streaming it. So I was like, you better make sure the live stream works because U2 is going to be the surprise guest. And I was like, oh, crikey, okay. And so then we were backstage, and like literally it was in the Maya Music Bowl thing. So there's about 5,000-6,000 people there packed because it's on Hamish and Andy at the height of their powers. And Bono said to me, what's the audience? Like, what are they into? And I remember saying, they're really into Lily Allen and I Kissed a Girl and, Katy Perry, I Kissed a Girl. And he's like, should we do that? And I was like, Bono's asking me what their playlist should be. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, and he said, how does it go? And I start going, I Kissed a Girl and I liked it, something cherry. And then the Edge sort of like just goes, it's I Kissed a Girl and I liked it, the taste of a cherry chapstick, and we're not fucking doing it. and Bono sort of laughed, and then they walked on stage and the whole crowd just erupted. Like it was so astonishing. I've got goosebumps now just thinking of it. It was amazing. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, so that's what it feels like to be a rock star. Like just, 20 feet from stardom kind of thing. It was nuts. Yeah. So, I mean, whether you like their music or not, there's something about people who just know how to own a stage.
Yeah. Now, Chief, do you want to take your game to a new level or that of your people? Our mini MBA in leading high-performance teams now has the highest NPS of any mini MBA style program in Australia at 91. Why? Because when you do the program, you get immediate and tangible performance improvement. You get dedicated time working on the business as opposed to away from it. We have a practical, real-world approach where we teach frameworks that you implement in your business as we go, and then you share and learn with your peers and with me as your coach. So the cost benefit is immediate, right? The weekly coaching sessions are live and you get a chance to ask questions direct to me and of your peers. And the time management is completely achievable because you're only spending a couple of hours a week on this at max, and those 2 hours are actually working on the business. So if you want to add something that really changes your game, that helps you become a real master of transformation and change and to inspire your people and love your job, check out chiefmakeup.com/mini MBA. Now listen, you have a annual Christmas dinner with your best mate.
Yeah.
Do I have forever and a day? There's just two of you.
Yep.
And actually, it's actually turned out to be quite prescient and predictive of the future. In the
Well, I mean, let's not get carried away here, but yes.
Yeah. Well, by design or by accident? Well, let's. Can you just tell us a bit about this annual catch up with your best mate? What do you talk about, and what's been the most interesting thing you've ever discussed that's come true?
Well, okay, so Kane and I, it just sort of evolved. It was just this Christmas party where he and I would catch up and off we go. But I mean, that we've been friends for like, it's got to be coming up to 30 years. So you learn a lot. You go through a whole bunch of different life stages, and you debrief and chat and spitball different ideas. And he did the first season of Big Brother, and shot all of that. So his background has always been in that sort of technology entertainment era as well, and being on the cutting edge. And I remember it was 2015, and he and I were off having our Christmas party, and he said, "Look, there's this VR meetup, and I want to go to it." And I was like, "VR, really? What? Like, come on, mate." And he's like, "No, I think it's going to be a thing." So we went along, and Samsung was doing it, and we went in there and chucked on the VR headsets. And at the time, there was like mobile phones, and you put them into a glass plate, and there was a couple of VR headsets that were really heavy and clunky and so on. And anyhow, there was like a VR thing where a giant blue whale sails past you, and it was astonishing. And he's like, "Yeah, this is going to be a thing. Like, VR is going to play, and it's going to be amazing, and we should get on board." And that was the basis of Start Beyond. Really, that was where the seed really came from, because he went home and set up a page called Start VR, and originally we were called Start VR with the whole idea that we're going to start this and it's going to happen. And
wow, so that's the nexus of Start Beyond.
So basically, Kane, and I was working at Nova at the time, and so then Ed Sheeran we were going to do a Nova Red Room, and so then the idea was that we'd get Ed Sheeran, and we'd make it a 360, and we'd make it like an Ed Sheeran 360 Red Room, and so it could be available in VR as well. And so we got Qantas on board. They were going to be the sponsor. Ed Sheeran was up for it. Everything was all systems go. Kane was building out the back end of how we were going to make it all happen, and doing the research around the different 360 cameras and so on. And then right at the 11th hour, it fell over because Ed Sheeran's team wanted to be able to have more of his crew paid for. And Qantas wasn't prepared to pay for more of the crew. And so the whole thing fell over. Ed Sheeran's a good guy too. Like he was a talented guy who wasn't a diva. And anyhow, but the basis of that was that then we had the basis of the company of Start VR. So I jumped ship about 6 months later, left Nova, joined Start VR, and we were off and running.
Can you you said to me once, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I just think it's like this guy who like taught the CEOs at Business Harvard School. So he was like the CEO teacher. And he said strategy is choosing what not to do. And I just think that that's spot on. Strategy is choosing what not to do. Like, you could do bloody everything and you'll get nowhere. And when it comes to what I do with VR and AR, like, there's all this technology out there. So just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. So like, just sticking a camera somewhere doesn't make it interesting what you capture. And there's a whole bunch of people within the industry who come at it from a technology point of view. And because of that, they're excited about what the technology can do, but they don't think about actually how the audience or the user is going to feel based on what they do. So they just make stuff for the sake of making it, but it doesn't have any value or merit. And so I always use that sort of lens to make sure that we're actually doing something that's worthwhile.
Yeah, so you're coming from that storyteller side, right?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
I watched a video recently of a Apple shareholders meeting where Steve Jobs is openly challenged by a rogue shareholder. Just
Right.
back to Apple, and he's challenging Steve Jobs about the technology they're using in the back end and saying it's wrong tech. And Steve, does a few things, but then he said, I've always been of the belief that you start with your customer.
Yeah.
Work out what is the best possible experience for them and all that. And then you work out the tech second. You don't start tech first and then work out customer, because it won't work, right? And I thought it was it's a very elegant response. That sort of
that's spot on.
cuts the guy down, It's, yeah. You also said to me that something can be award-winning, but not award-winning. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, you can make stuff that like gets all the awards, but no one cares less. Yeah. And so it comes back to like, who's your audience really? Like, is your audience just to be able to puff your chest up and show that you've done something that's really new and cool? Yeah. Or is your audience actually the people who need to buy it or who need to engage with it or feel something from it? And so that's award winning. That's what I mean by that. Like, then the notion of like who's the judge essentially. Yeah.
So 2016, you've got this idea, Start VR becomes Start Beyond. You're talking about strategy there before. Strategy is as much about what you don't do as what you do. So you've gotten this in front of you, this set of opportunities, right? Start over, do something else. You make a conscious decision to go, no, 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 and yes to Start Beyond.
Yeah.
Why did you go that path and not the others?
Oh, look, I mean, there's a bunch of different reasons. Everyone's different. Everyone's got their own areas of priority. We're all different things at different times make us put greater weight on some things other than others. At that stage, I'd worked in small agencies and I'd seen, how businesses run at a small level. And then I'd worked at Austereo and at Nova, and I'd seen how they run at a sort of national level and where you've got like 600 plus employees, and I'd seen what that meant. And so I understood business from both sides of the table. And it made me realize, like, earlier on in my career, I'd had this person who I was working for, and they'd said, look, I want you to be a partner in the business. And the business, I was like, I don't know enough about business to start up and set up a little digital agency. And so I said no to her and jumped ship into Australia. So by the time 2016 came, I'd done the yards in the business world, and I'd realized that, I'm basically sort of early 40s, and I'm like, I've worked for so many other people. And every time you do that, you have to make a choice about like whether your values are being compromised or, you're investing your time in essentially, making someone else wealthy, or, there's so many different variables that come with that. But fundamentally what it came down to was I did not want to be beholden to someone else for my destiny. The office politics, the different ways that things can play out. And I was just like, I want to be able to, stand on my own 2 feet. And I really believed in Kane and the idea of virtual reality and how that could play. And I just thought, life's short. That's like, if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? And it's all well and good to compromise because like you've got to be pragmatic. I had 2 young kids. It was, you need to have enough runs on the board to be able to know that if you're going to do this, there's calculated risk. And
Yes.
and I was like, okay, well, yeah, if not now, then when? And so I jumped.
Reminds me of this great line by Warren Miller, who was a ski movie documentary maker. One of the
I remember. Yeah.
I used to watch Warren Miller movies every year. Then he said, if you don't do it this year, it'll be 1 year later when you do. And it was I think it was almost one of the final lines of every documentary, at least one every single year for like 30, 40 years.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, interesting. So let's talk about where VR, AR is now. So Start Beyond now, you're really the country's leading VR and AR immersive learning studio. So you do a lot of learning and development. And you use AR, VR as a method of learning. What do we now know about the learning process that this is really helping people get better quickly, more quickly, learning faster? What are we learning about?
So basically, to break it down, so virtual reality, you're chucking on the headset, you're in a totally immersed space. So unlike life where you've got multiple screens, multiple areas of being able to be distracted, you're on the goggles and there's nowhere to hide. You're just in whatever that environment is. So the beauty of that is that then not only can you transport the user to anywhere, the classroom becomes whatever that content is inside the VR headset. So you can transport the user to any location, but then also you can shift and play with perspective. So the thing that we know is the way that people learn the most is through experience. Like there's no faster way to learn than to do. Yeah. And so the beauty of VR is that it allows you to essentially do and learn through experience without the physical or emotional risk. And so you can try things out in VR and then learn from that to then take into the real world. So that could be simple stuff like speed to proficiency based on understanding by visualizing something, like, like for example, with Woolies, simple stuff like, is this avocado ripe versus this one, and you see them in front of you, and then you have to use your hands to choose which one's the right one, and you're off and running. So visualizing stuff really simply. Or it can be, more complex stuff like emotional intelligence and having a situation play out whereby the person that you're dealing with, say a dementia patient or a customer who's upset about something, and depending on how you respond to them will either escalate or de-escalate the situation. And so you can learn how to deploy theoretical things that you've been told in virtual reality, and thereby learn by doing and have this sort of visceral effect. If the camera is the user, and that's the way we set it up, then what happens is that the actors are then talking directly to you. So you feel very much present in the situation. So if you've got some old bloke yelling at you because he's lost his watch, and you've got these little pop-ups that then turn up of like, how do you want to answer this guy's question? If you answer it right, then the old bloke's going to calm down, and you immediately go, oh, well, that's what I can take, that skill, and take it into the workforce.
Yeah.
So So that's the sort of play with VR. Whereas with augmented reality, the beauty of AR is that it adds a layer of information onto your existing situation. And so what that means is that, for example, if you've got instructions on how to, say, one of the pieces we've done was around air conditioning units. And so for TAFE students learning how to fix an air conditioning unit, they've got the little grid there and it shows how all the bits work. But we make the AR version of that, and suddenly you've got a 3D model of that air conditioning unit, and it shows that the gases come in here, they change temperature here, it then becomes this fluid, and then that's how the air goes cold or hot. Then it visualizes this really complex theory in a way that people can then make tangible and understand, and takes these sort of concepts and makes them into a 3D real world application. And then people are like, oh, right, I get it now.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, because we're primarily visual and auditory learners, and it's just we've had to use reading and text because it's been the most accessible way to date. This is changing that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, but I suppose it allows you to do experiential learning more at scale.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, spot
Because
on.
a lot of experiential learning is really, so like one of my good mates works at the police academy, and
Yeah, right.
he just gives a great example of how he was teaching two cadets who were about to potentially go, on the beat, and they had to finish the final thing, which was almost what you described there. Come into a room as a partnership. It's a domestic situation, and there's a player who's very, very angry. They've got a knife. You got to disarm them. And if you go in angry, they get worse. Like that, they're all actors, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly the same thing. They get worse and worse and worse. He said the first time they went in, there was a guy and a girl. The first one, she was really nervous. This girl, because if she didn't pass it, she's back to the start in the category.
Yeah,
Weeks to
yeah.
restart. She comes in. She's got a taser on her hip. She comes in. She just pulls it out and just like brings it up and just shoots it, and it goes flying up into the roof. Like,
Oh my God.
Slow down. Let's calm
Yeah.
down and let's try this again. Then he starts to get sort of all off put by it. And he goes a bit crazy. He draws his gun in the next one. In the third one, he accidentally left his gun in the prep room. And so,
Oh my God.
so he's taken his gun out of his thing. He's put his firearm on the bench. He's walked into the room. He's going to stop there. My mate's holding the gun going, were you after this? Why were you after this?
Wow. Wow.
So I can see how, but that's I think he's there doing that, taking days and days and days to coach this, and that to me would feel like maybe something you would do after VR and AR training already. Again and again and again. We go from VR to AR, we go to real life, then,
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So do you see it as I think in some cases it is the learning, but in other cases it's an adjunct. It's an accessory to other learning, right?
Yeah, spot on. So I think like anything, there's different degrees of complexity, and based on those complexities will then determine how much you need to then have additional support with it. So, for example, we'll build out self-contained modules where you just pop on the headset, you learn what you need to know, and it's so self-contained that you don't need a facilitator, and you can just go out there on the floor and you're off and running. Like frontline workers, there's a whole bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then there's other stuff where, if you're looking at, say, microaggressions in the workplace or unconscious bias or, other, sort of diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of things where you're looking at managers and how they're navigating stuff, then you want to use those scenarios to confront the user to actually start to think differently about how, well, firstly, the choices they've made and how they've behaved, and then from that to actually learn from it. And if you do something like that, which can be pretty confronting, you want to then have a facilitator after it to be able to debrief with and work through that. And that otherwise it can become counterproductive. If you have people sort of questioning how their behaviors are without having that support network to then work through what they need to do to sort of be a bit more self-aware and then use those behaviors in a more constructive manner, and you don't have a facilitator, then you kind of left, you sort of strip someone down without giving them the tools to build themselves back up.
That's right.
Yeah. And with anything, you want this training to be part of a broader program and so on. So yeah.
What do you see? Cast your mind forward 10 years.
Yeah.
Where do you see learning?
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think that what's going to happen is that there's going to be just a continual evolution. Like there's always these hype cycles around VR and AR, and I think we're currently at the moment in a hype cycle around AI, and there's going to be just this continual evolution of the same way that we had the sort of first iteration of the internet, and then it just sort of built and it went from internet cafes into workplaces into home, and then how it's gradually ported across from the mobile phone just being a telephone, and how video then played out on mobile and all the rest. What's going to happen is that just incrementally, we're going to see more and more experiential, immersive learning scenarios, and education is going to become increasingly a mixture of totally immersive learning in VR and AR, as well as then having remote learning where you've got shared experiences where people are chatting to each other. And this flat screen 2D environment that we're dealing with now, that's just going to just slowly whittle away. And ultimately in 10 years time, people are very rarely going to be doing any traditional 2D video calls. They're going to be doing it in a spatial environment. And the beauty of that, the reason why I think that all plays, because like, so on the cons side, you've got like the nuisance of putting on the VR headset, and that's a pain in the neck. But those headsets over the next 10 years are just going to become like a pair of glasses. They're going to get lighter and easier. But irrespective of that, already what we're finding is that if you have, like, there's so much sort of 2D fatigue of like this flat screen thing. If you're doing, Zoom meetings, everyone's sick to death of it. So people want to go back to face-to-face. But the other thing is that off the back of COVID, like the travel budgets aren't going to be the same. And so there's going to be this frustration of, I don't want to do the 2D Zoom meeting, but nor do I have the money to go and fly interstate to see this person. So how do I have this middle ground? And the immersive meeting, where you pop on the goggles and everyone can chat to each other. You can actually make eye contact with each other. So it means you can have multiple conversations going on, because I'm looking at you and then someone's talking over here, spatial sound, I can hear them in my right ear. So then I can turn and then chat to them. And that conversation can keep going. So then you actually feel like you're making eye contact, and then people can talk over each other. It's not this static Zoom thing. It's actually a lot more fluid. And that, I think, is going to incrementally become more and more popular, and then ultimately just become mainstream.
What's your perspective on the future of business and careers? Like, more context is AI's taking a lot of the low value work out now. It's actually starting to take a certain percentage of even high value work. And from some of the things I've seen, it's probably going to do the high value work better than executives without bias and without a whole range of other things, because people in the end will have all sorts of emotive or poor cognitive reasons for making a bad decision, right? What do you see people doing?
So I went to this thing about a year ago, and it was this guy who worked at Amazon, who's part of their AI team. And the way he described it, I thought was on point. He said that the way that AI currently works is much how he dances at 3 a.m. in the morning. It's with blind confidence in their ability.
Hell good.
Yeah. Absolute blind confidence in their ability that is unjustified. And let's be clear, AI is taking its information from the internet, and we know that the internet is not a source of truth. We know that the internet has truth in it, but it also has a whole bunch of stuff which isn't true. And so then what plays is that there has to be ways of then putting guardrails on this AI to make sure that it's able to filter out in a very black, white, yes, no, binary sort of sense, what is truth and what isn't. And it cannot do that without influence. And at the moment, there's already unconscious bias that's playing into the AI. And so you need to then have parameters set by humans about what that is. But then the humans will go, well, it'll be cheaper to get AI to do it. So then you're going to have this magnificent cycle of like AI guardrailing AI.
Yeah.
And the upshot of that is going to be that the businesses will go through this cycle of like putting faith in it, then getting burnt by putting too much faith in it. And then we'll step back and go, well, hang on, we need to hold on to the machine and the guardrails and actually the controls ourselves, even if we are human and flawed.
Yep.
So, yeah. So I think what will happen is in the future, what will play is that authenticity and trust are going to be the two major factors, and that will become the currency.
Yeah. I've been pondering a lot what the future role of leaders is. I like where you went there with the human piece over the top of AI and all our systems. I think the other one is creativity and the stuff that AI will never be able to do, which is that unique human creativity that just comes out of our incredible brains. The third is that connection and collaboration and deep sense of community and tribe in an office, which AI can't really ever do that properly, right? Because I think it's already starting to come through as people are missing connection.
Yeah.
Proper, true human connection. And I think that's going to be a really vital skill of leaders going forward. So the better you are at that, understanding the strategy, connecting to the AI piece. I haven't considered that AI guardrails. I really like that piece of each other, makes really good sense. and the creativity and the connection piece. Right.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm in the technology field, but I'm not an acolyte to it. I'm very much like, the reason why I want to do this stuff is because I feel there's value in it, and there's ways of doing it that can be really, really useful and purposeful, and I love it. But I'm not just some, I don't think all technology is just going to have all the answers. And I think you've got to be astute in how you play with it.
Yeah. Well, at Start Beyond right now, what are you most excited about?
Oh my goodness. There's so many things. I don't know, like, the business is it's in a really sweet spot at the moment. We've got a great team. We've got just a really, like, the business, the clients that we have are like really great clients. We're doing work that is really, really valuable, and we've got a great team that's executing it. And like, one piece in particular that I'm really excited about is we're building out, we did this piece. So part of my gig is I'm kind of like a little ship that sails into all these little ports, and you deal with these big enterprises, and you find out what their pain points are. And the thing that is really across all the different industries, because the stuff we do is not industry centric. So, we work across those principles that we talked about before around the benefits of VR and AR are industry agnostic. And what we're finding is that across the board, so many businesses are finding that their workforce is feeling fatigued, that there's issues around mental health and resilience. And the flip side of that is that their customers are really aggressive. And there's like this universal stress that's being felt at both ends of that sort of dynamic. And so we're actually building out at the moment a piece which is around how to manage aggressive customers and how to identifying them, and have it for retail and hospitality, which will be a VR piece. And this is off the back of, we did a piece for Woolies, which was how to cope when you are faced with an aggressive customer. So someone is either verbally abusive or pulls a knife, or it's being rat bags in the shopping center, pushing the trolleys around and so on. And they had, within 3 months, we had 50,000 Woolies employees go through that program. And the value to the organization of that was astronomical. So we've looked at that and the success of that and gone, right, let's make an off-the-shelf generic piece that we can then provide to retailers and hospitality, which is around de-escalating those situations before they actually come to light. And so being able to notice the traits of a bulldog type customer, or a viper type customer, or a sort of chameleon type customer, and see these sort of attributes, and then be able to de-escalate it before they get aggressive, or before they snap at you, or before they lose their marbles. And then that way calm the situation down, allow the worker to remain, in a positive headspace, and de-escalate. So stuff like that excites me, because I know that the learning and the technology will deliver those results. We've done so much of this stuff in the past, and it's paid off. So to know that we can build something like that, and know that there's a need in the industries for it, and that it'll play, it's like the perfect sort of business. You're doing something where you're going to make a buck, but you're going to do stuff that's going to help people as well. So yeah, that's what excites me at the moment.
Great business.
So, I mean, geez, Greg, I'll tell you, don't get me started. But yeah, I love my job. It's my most favorite job. It's easy to talk about.
Righto, Chief. More from Angus in a minute. Now, recently, we continued our Best Of series by featuring Roland Frazier, the CEO of All Channels Media. We spoke about pulling off creative business deals, modelling and masterminding. Here's what Roland had to say about not accepting the status quo.
So, if a business deal, a marketing problem, a business problem comes to me, I'm thinking about everything that I know that I've encountered before in every situation that is not business as much as I am business. And then it's somehow identifying, like not being constrained, I guess, to a formula that let's say, I'll use business acquisitions as an example because I think it's a good one, is the way you buy businesses, you pay money for it. I don't accept that, right? I don't accept that as a fact of how you buy businesses.
You can listen to that brilliant conversation with Roland by going to chiefmaker.com/333. Righto, Chief. Let's get back to the remarkable Angus Stevens of Start Beyond. Hey, let's talk a bit about your book. You wrote a book called Viewer Discretion Advised. And you found this to be a very different, I suspect almost cathartic kind of process. You said running a company is about navigating everyone. Writing a book gives you this thing away from work, expression of creativity. Can you talk a bit about the process of writing the book and what that was like for you?
Yeah, look, I mean, it was an absolute delight. It was an idea that I had in 2019. I was coming back from a job overseas, and it just sort of dawned on me that there was a story there. And yeah, I mean, it's just you on the page. So it's just a very creative process. It's really driven. I mean, you know, my background was in directing and writing and so on from, you know, my early 20s, and your business evolves and you get further and further sort of removed from that creative process, but it doesn't mean it doesn't stop. And so that storytelling energy I'd placed into the business, but this was a great outlet for me to be able to actually just and I encourage everyone at work to have pet projects on the side. I think it's really important because I think it invigorates you and thereby invigorates your work, both creatively in your day job, but then also on the creative side outside of your day job. So yeah, so I just would late at night, weekends, early mornings, get stuck in.
I think what certainly what it did for me was really make me get crystal clear about what it was I wanted to say, in what order. And so anytime I go and talk about, and it's in our book now, like it's so clear in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't even have to prefer, I could just do it, right? Because they're so worried about what people would say if you wrote a shit book.
Well, yeah, I mean, I studied English, so I was psyched out for like 20 years, 30. Or, yeah, something like that. Nuts, because you just read the greatest writers in the world and you're like, oh my God, well, I'm never going to be able to do that. And so, yeah.
Let's talk a bit about the topic. You've got a real passion around male identity, personal growth. We're going to talk through a bit about what the book is actually about and why you chose that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So the premise of the book, like you know, from a plot perspective is basically, you know, write what you know about. So the idea is that the main character who, and I wanted to play with the whole idea of like, you know, fiction and non-fiction and all the rest. So the main character is a guy who runs a VR company. So blow me down with a feather. And then play with where that goes. And so basically he downloads this app when he's at the airport, and the app allows him to enter his favorite films. And then he gets to be the main character in his favorite films. And so he can be like the 80s rom-com lead. He can be an action hero. He can be, you know, in a spy thriller. He can do whatever the hell he likes. And it's just like, oh my God, this is great. And he's absolutely loving it. And that's really a springboard to be able to explore, you know, the sort of male identity, but to do it in a fun way. And you know, and then he's in the app and then he can't get out. He's trapped in the app. And so, and then that's, you know, where the story goes from there, you know. Hopefully folks will pick it up and read it and find out.
The book is, as you said, it's that mix between fiction and non-fiction. But there's a deeper part to this, which is the greater reason you wrote it, about the journey men are going on right now, and us trying to evolve into a new world. Can you talk a bit about what that is?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, so the premise of having it be about, you know, this guy and being able to be in all these different movies is to use this concept of, you know, like to make it light and playful, but actually to explore the way, you know, as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, you know, the way masculinity was depicted and also the way women were depicted. And, you know, you're watching all these Hollywood films and like, it's just madness. And it's continued for the past 20, 30 years as well beyond that. And so what I wanted the book to be able to do was to be able to have this guy, this Gen X guy, have to grapple with what, as a teenager, he thought was appropriate. And then the real world now, and the recognition that no, that was not appropriate. And that the sort of innate casual sexism, homophobia, racism that was just bread and butter in these classic Hollywood films is not cool. And how does he recognize his role in that, and how is he prepared to change so that he's not, pale, male, and stale, and that sort of tension between being a kid and thinking this is how the world is, and being a grown-up and recognizing it's not how the world is, and how are you going to recalibrate yourself to be able to live in this world and be useful and enjoy it.
What I like about that is, first of all, the whole premise of that is good, right? But as like I do a lot of work in mental health, we take away mental camps and things like that. And some of that's pretty full on. It's some that's heavy and hard for guys, but they go on the journey they want to go. We don't force them down any rabbit hole or any particular philosophy, but they while they're choosing, make it a bit hard and heavy. But sometimes you need to be able to approach this with a lightness, not have anything accusational about it, or it can be a little bit oppositional. Some of this topic sometimes. I don't think that really helps all the time. Like it can be good to be challenged, but sometimes you can see guys get their back up a bit, and trying not to, calm down, we're doing our best, that kind of, that there at the same time. You got to catch up. It's a good book. I'm on one of my about 5 chapters in, and it's going really well. So I recommend checking it out. Yeah. We'll put it in the show notes, team. Viewer discretion advised by Angus Stevens. Well worth your time. Hey, Angus, this has been fascinating, mate. I'd love to finish with some rapid fire questions. Okay. Short answers. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. If you could form the ultimate executive team made up of well-known leaders from any time and anywhere in history, who would your first 3 picks be, and what roles would you put them in?
Okay. So I love this question. I'll try to be brief. So I'm gonna go Dwight D. Eisenhower, because the Eisenhower matrix is so on point. And it's like, so he's gonna be my COO, because he's gonna get shit done. He's well organized.
Yep.
Irrespective, but he's so the Eisenhower matrix tick. Then I'm going Lady Gaga as my CMO, because that woman is smart, and having met her a couple of times and seen her go from someone who was just breaking out into the music industry to the megastar that she is, she was so clever, and she knew her audience, and she has then evolved and changed and just built out her brand in such a brilliant way. So I've got her as my CMO, and she's going to take this company through the roof.
Yep.
And then for my CTO, I'm going the CTO I have right now at Start Beyond, Jager, because Jager is a genius. I love working with him, and
Nice. Jager's hit the jackpot.
He's a clever cat, Jager. I tell you,
scientist.
Yeah, no, and plus, I love working with him. So if I'm going to have my dream team, he's still in it.
Hey, what was the most valuable learning program of your career, structured learning program, outside of work experience?
Mentorship.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I think having a mentor has been the biggest learning piece that I've had.
What was the most valuable thing a mentor said to you?
To ask the question, what can I do? How can I help? What can I do to help your business be better? How can I help you with your role? Do your role better?
Yeah.
It's a really great question. It's so simple, but it's so good.
Has a mentor or a former boss ever held you to account in a way and you went, sort of stubborn because the feedback was pretty heavy, but you took it to heart because you trusted them and you knew it was true?
I think that I've made mistakes in jobs, and it's been called out, but it was stuff that I already knew. And that came back to the fact that I don't know, it's, you know, you have this sort of romance, you kick off a gig and you're fully into it, and then things erode for whatever reason, and then you just, you know, you go from being in love with it to not being, and when that happens, your performance slips, and you know that it slipped. Yeah.
What is your number one interview question when employing people on your team?
I actually really do like the question of what's the biggest mistake you've made.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Biggest mistake.
I think that's a cracker, because you know straight away, like, firstly, you can tell how much of a bullshitter they are.
Totally.
And secondly, how they learn from it, you know.
And you can't bullshitter, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, the biggest mistake I ever made, I remember it very clearly. I was doing a shoot, and the producer, who was my boss, rang me up because I was directing it and said, "Where are you?" And I was in bed, and the whole crew was there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that was when I was like, I've got to quit this job. My heart is not in this job.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. That was, yeah.
Okay. What's the number one book you recommend? Should we just recommend yours? Or yeah.
Honestly, because I did English. Yeah. There's so many books that I love, but yeah, I'm going viewer discretion advised. Yeah. I agree. Why not?
Okay, can you nominate another CEO you hold with great respect you'd like to be on the podcast?
Yeah, so Nick Mercer, he is former CEO of Mercer Bell, and he is he's the bloke who's been my mentor, and I've learned a shit ton from that guy. He is the one clever cat, and he's a good soul too.
Outstanding. We'll try and lure him onto the show. Okay.
Yeah.
You could lead any company in the world other than your own. What would it be?
Yeah, I love this question. I don't know how you pronounce it, but Condé Nast, basically the guys who own the New Yorker, Reddit, Wired. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting business, and I feel like I would love to have a crack at making that work.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. Angus, mate, what is a final message of wisdom and hope for the next generation of chiefs?
This is the thing I really believe in. If you share the pie gets bigger.
Thank you for your time, your energy, for what you're creating in the world. It's very exciting, and it feels value-led, mate. And I think that's really outstanding, mate. Thank you for your time.
My absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed it, Greg.
Chief, that sums up for this week. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Angus Stevens. I highly recommend checking out his business, Start Beyond. And of course, pick up his book, Viewer Discretion Advised. All the links and show notes can be found at chiefmaker.com/334. And if you'd like to stay in touch with Chiefmaker, just go to chiefmaker.com/subscribe. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus on the show bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now. Give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chief. As always, remember to stay happy.